This screencast supports this lesson. It comes from Language to Go Pre-Intermediate by G. Cunningham and S. Mohammed, published by Longman. It's lesson 10, and this is what the student's book page looks like. You're going to need a couple of other things to go along with it. You've got the teacher's book notes. There's some useful points on the language here and ideas for a lead-in, as well as information on the answers to the activities. I've also got this additional task which comes from the back of the teacher's book, so I'll talk more about that towards the end of the screencast. For additional material, you've got some stuff from the additional control practice resources at the back of the student's book. Now, if you remember, I've put all of these on Teams, so it's got the ones for every lesson, and if you scroll down, you'll find the items for this lesson, lesson 10. So that's under Teams additional extra controlled practice tasks. And similarly, you've got the grammar reference, all of which is on Teams. So you just need to scroll down to find lesson 10. And remember that it's useful to look at this as well as looking at a grammar book for your research into the target language, because the stuff at the back of the book gives you an idea of what's expected at this level, i.e. pre-intermediate, rather than just giving you all the information about the grammar. Okay, so have a look here in conjunction with looking at a grammar book that you have or looking online when you're researching this grammar. So what we've got here is a lesson on with the grammar of, rather, the zero conditional. Okay, conditionals can be quite a big area, and we're looking at the zero conditional here. And I can see that there's some control practice here as a gap fill, and there looks like there's some freer practice there. I'm not so keen on this, so that's where I'm going to substitute in the task that comes from the back of the teacher's book. Okay, so yeah, the grammar looks okay. It looks like it's catered for. So where does that grammar come from? We need a context, somewhere to get the examples from. And here it is. We've got a reading, and it's like a kind of quiz, this reading. So it's quite interesting. And there's also a little bit of vocabulary to go with it, just to beef up the language content of this particular unit. So let's look at how the lesson will start. Okay, so we want to start off by introducing some vocabulary and providing some practice of that vocabulary. Now, we don't want to dive straight into it. That could be a bit dull. We need to warm the students up a little bit first. So the teacher's book has an idea for throwing out some words and getting the students to give the opposite. So you'd say hot. Hopefully they say cold, in, out, and things like that, okay, which you could just do by doing an example and then you saying a word and then them saying the opposite. Then that might warm them up a little bit, and then you can get into this activity here. So we're trying to find out what the students know first. Do they know the opposites that are here? There is an alternative to just using this matching task here. I'll show you. This activity is in the extra controlled practice tasks on Teams under lesson 10, and it uses pictures instead. So you've got the vocabulary in the box here, and there's an example here which you could elicit from the students. You could just show the picture and elicit these words, and then they work together to try to decide where the other words go, which I think is quite a nice, slightly more challenging, I think, activity. It's got the pictures there for visual learners, so that could work quite nicely. So do it as a test, teach, test, do the example together, let the students try to put in the words by themselves and then compare with partners, and then feedback the answers together, clarifying any misunderstandings, any problems, and also making sure that you deal with pronunciation of anything that are any of them that are difficult. So looking at it there, I would think that take, the A sound, I often find quite tricky. Forget, where's the stress? Forget. It's on the second syllable, isn't it? And this is not forget, but forget. So there's some pronunciation work to do there as well. And you may need to check meaning. Lend and borrow are quite tricky. And it's also worth, I think, they're dealing with form and saying that you borrow something from somebody and you lend something to somebody. So there's an important element of form there as well. Now, I don't think that all of the words in the exercise in the student's book are covered here. So if you do use this activity, then remember that there might be some words that you haven't covered. Let's go back to the student's book and have a look. Yes, you can see that we didn't have fill and empty in the previous activity, and we didn't have open and close. So therefore, either deal with those in your lead-in at the beginning or as examples at the beginning, or cover them afterwards if you've used the pictures to introduce the target language. And then once you've dealt with meaning and drilled the tricky ones, and maybe dealt with some issues of form as well, which I think is mainly with lend and borrow, then it's important that you do some practice. So this looks quite nice. They just have to choose the right one from here. Okay. If you want to make it more difficult, you could just make these into gaps rather than giving the options, depending on the strength of your learners. I guess if they're a strong group, you can make that more difficult by doing that. Now, a lot of those verbs are in the reading. Okay, so that's one of the other reasons why that activity comes first. And also there are a few words in the reading that the students will need to know. I think it's trolley and refuse and cancel. That's what the teacher's book suggests, and I agree. So you need to pre-teach those either with pictures or definitions, trying to elicit them from the students. Okay. Show them the question. How do you behave? Maybe show a picture of a toddler having a tantrum, or someone saying please and thank you, and saying which one does the person behave well, and in which one do the people behave badly, to give them the idea of how do you behave means. Let's say, let's find out about you. Okay, let's look at the first one together. Get the students to read it and choose the answer that is right for them. Okay, so read the question, decide if you think your answer is A, B, or C. Give them time to read, and then you can say, okay, my answer is, oh, I don't know, or I'd say B. I'm a very nice person. There you go. And get the students to talk together, keep it light-hearted, and then you can say, good, now I want you to read the other 4 questions and choose your answer. Leave them to quietly do that. Set a time limit. I think that'll be a good idea, 4 minutes maybe. And then when they've done that, put them into breakout rooms with a partner to discuss their answers. Do you agree? Did you give the same answers? Then if you like, you can use this key and put the key in the chat and get them to have a look. It gives them a sort of judgment about them, but I don't think you really need to do that part if you don't want to. And the teacher's book and the book itself has a more complex sort of way of setting this up. But I say do it simply, do an example together, let them do the others by themselves, and then discuss with somebody else. Okay, and keep it to that. And this is the context for the target language. It has the 0 conditional in it. Okay, so remember that. And let's have a look at that grammar section now. Okay, so here's the grammar focus. I don't feel that what's on the page here is particularly useful, so we need to switch it up a little bit. I would suggest, seeing as we've got something that's got 2 sentences, if blah, 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 then we should have some mixed up things on the board. So some sentences based on the text with the first clause and the result clause on the screen, and get the students to match them together to make the full conditional sentences. Okay. Then you can go into meaning first. Now, I don't really like this, it depends, doesn't depend. I don't think my students are going to understand that. So you need to guide them through it. So for example, if I forget a friend's birthday, I send a card later. I would say, okay, so what happens first? Forget the birthday or send the card? Forget the birthday. Good. Is it definite that we forget the birthdays at 100% sure? No, it's if. Okay, if they say when, actually in a zero condition, it's kind of okay, but let's go with the if, all right? Teacher's book talks more about that. So to get them to the idea of the dependent clause, just say what happens first and what happens second. And then you need to elicit the form. So you can say, what verb do we have in the if sentence? Forget. What's the tense? Is it past simple, present simple? It's present simple, that's right. What about in the other sentence, the result? Past simple, present simple, it's present simple. Good. And then the other thing that needs to be pointed out is that they can be the other way round. You can say, I send a card later if I forget a friend's birthday. There is a change with the use of the commas, which you need to point out to the students, but try to show them examples and get them to tell you the rules, okay? Rather than just telling them. It'll help to engage them much more. So try to clarify, try to elicit rather than tell. Pronunciation is really all about the rhythm of the sentence. So, and the if he, that linking as well. So drill a few of these with the correct words stressed. Treat it quite lightheartedly, but try to get students to increase their pace and speed. Okay. So controlled practice first to see if the students can manipulate the verbs and put them in the right forms. Okay, it's a very important stage. They could do this alone and then check in pairs in a breakout room. I think that would be great, and then they'll get some peer teaching going on, and you can monitor and see where the problem areas lie. And then some nice clear feedback, eliciting the answers from the students, and then making sure it's visual as you go along, please. Okay, as you go along, make sure these answers are visual to help the learners to follow. And for the freer practice, I'm not so keen on the idea in the book, but if you fancy it, then go ahead with that. But this is quite nice. It comes from the back of the teacher's book. It's an extra task. Obviously, it's meant to be done face-to-face, but we can do it in an online version. So let's have a look at the cards that are involved. All right, so you've got a whole load of these, and the idea is that you give them jumbled up, and then they make the 3 cards that match together, and then they speak together about the question. So there's 2 stages to it. So I would suggest first that you do an example, maybe take the first one and have the 3 things mixed up on a slide and say, well, what should we put first? What should we put next? What should we put after that? And then that will give them the idea of matching the cards together. Then you need them to be looking at the cards and matching them. I think if you have them in different colours for the if sentences, red and then blue for these ones and then green for these ones or something like that, you can say, okay, start with the red and then you need a blue and then a green, and then they can talk together to decide which ones match together. Check those answers and then demonstrate how they can do some speaking to answer the questions. Okay, so go back to the first one and talk about it together, and then send them back to the breakout rooms to talk about the ones they've just put together. Okay, it sounds a bit complicated, but I think it will work well. So it's 2 stages basically. First, put together the right set of cards, then check that, and then the second stage is talk about the questions. And while they're talking, you can monitor and note any errors or good language usage in order to clarify it at the end. And that's the end of the lesson. If there's anything you want to add, there are a couple of extra tasks in the additional control practice tasks, or you might want to use that task from the book, the speaking task. So there are other options out there as well.